Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm out here on Lake Chickamauga doing a little bit of frog fishing. It is October, and to me October is the month, especially on the TVA, for fishing a frog over heavy grass mats. So what essentially happens throughout the year, and the reason why October and November is such a good time to throw a frog, is because all summer long, you know, the grass starts growing, you know, in the spring, around April, May, that's when it starts to grow. And then all through the summer, it gets really, really thick. But the problem is that it is consistently thick from the roots all the way to the surface, and so it's not really good for the fish to live in. There's not a whole lot of room to you know, swim around in, and so the cover's there, but there's just not as much living space, if you will. But what happens during the late summer and going into the fall is there is so little light penetration going through these grass mats that the root systems start to break up. They start to die off. And so that creates a series of tunnels, open spaces underneath those mats. So you've got that cover over their heads, but there's plenty of space for the bass and also bait fish to move around. So that's why the fall is probably the prime time for grass mat fishing. So I wanted to show you guys exactly what I do to my frogs to make them ready and optimized for fishing over these grass mats, because it is very, very different than just fishing a traditional, you know, walking frog in open water. I think it's super important to customize your baits specifically for mat fishing with a frog. So let's dive into it. So here we have a frog that I've customized to pretty much my specifications for the mats that I'm fishing. You know, the mats that I'm fishing out here on Lake Chickamauga, they're not the thickest mats I've ever seen, but they're pretty dense. This right here is the Z-Man Elite Frogs. This is the 2.75 version, and this is the frog that I generally use. I use the black the majority of the time. I just think black is a killer color for fishing these mats. It just gives a really, really good solid profile, and that's what we want. We want those fish to be able to kind of track that bait underneath those mats. All right, so some of the key customizations that I make, this is an original, you know, right out of the package, Elite Frog, same frog, just before I customize it. So as you can see, one of the first most obvious customizations is how short I cut those legs. You know, with a walking frog, I might leave the legs quite a bit longer. I'll still probably trim them a little bit, you know, maybe an inch or so, because those are pretty long. I mean, even for walking a frog, those are a little bit long. So that's the first thing I'll do, is I'll cut these legs down to barely an inch, maybe just a half an inch, and I even cut them down to almost to the nub there. Really, the legs are not important for mat fishing. You know, you want the fish to really focus on the body of the bait where the hooks are, and they're really not adding any attraction when you're talking about, you know, skittering this over a dense grass mat. So that's the first thing I do, cut those legs down to barely anything. The next thing I'll do is I always bring this little Tic Tac container, and I've got a bunch of BBs in here. And so the next thing I'll do, you can actually hear it in here. We've got a bunch of BBs already in this because I've already wanted to weight this down for the mat fishing that I'm already doing. But I like to add these little BBs. Let's get in here. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Just like the Red Ryder BB gun, just those little BBs right there. I keep those with me. And let's see, let's put the focus on that. So those little BBs, and what I'll do is I will insert it right there where the hook comes out, and essentially what I'm trying to do is just create just enough weight to create a nice little indentation in the mat as I work this frog. If you're not creating like a trench, as I call it, or one of those indentations, those channels, when you're walking the frog, you're probably not putting enough pressure on the mat. Putting pressure on the mat and creating these channels allows this bait to be where the fish can kind of track it. You know, the fish can track that bait as it presses down on the mat. So I add just enough weight to do that. Some mats are really dense, so you got to put enough BBs in here to essentially sink like a rock if you cast it in open water, or maybe just a few, you know. And it also adds a lot of extra sound too, as you can hear. Quite a bit of extra rattling sound as well. So the BBs are actually a really big part, important part of customizing the frog. So those are the two primary customizations that I make for my frog. You know, some guys will actually take the hooks and you know, bend them up slightly, but I will not do that. I don't like doing that with a frog fishing over the mat, because it tends to snag on, you know, the algae, the grass, whatever. I really like that bait to, you know, or those hooks to be flush with the bait. And with the leapfrogs, honestly, this isn't just a plug, but the hook is just perfect and the depth of the bait is perfect. I don't really have a bad hooking percentage at all. I've got a really good hooking percentage with this bait overall. So those are the two primary customizations that I make. First off, cutting those legs down. Next, adding enough weight to put that pressure on that mat and create that little trench. So those are just some of the things that I do to optimize my frogs for mat fishing. I generally have a box for mat frogs, because once you do make these customizations, they're generally you know, not great walking frogs. They're going to be specific for mat fishing, but doing these things will help you catch more fish for sure when you're fishing a frog over these dense mats. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and if you have any questions or comments, drop a comment below. I'll see you out on the water.